afternoon. My name is Nyssa and this is our small footprint. Welcome if you're new. Today I'm going to be making some sourdough crackers. So we use sourdough starter in a lot of things because I make it up in really large quantities, and I use it basically instead of the flour and water portion of a lot of things. This way it's already fermented, it's already broken down, so it's going to make anything that's made with it somewhat slightly digestible, and it's just a good habit to get into. It's a bit like soaking grains, soaking nuts. Using starter for something just works well for us. So I make a cracker dough using olive oil because we're dairy free, and with some herbs and stuff in it, and we use that cracker dough in summer a lot when we have mountains of fresh tomatoes. So we're getting about 2.5 kilos of tomatoes out of the gardens fresh every day at the moment. I'll pull them all together and I'll show you what we've got sitting on the bench at the moment. I do put them in Ziploc bags and freeze them to make so that I've got enough to make sauces when I want to make sauces, but it takes up a lot of freezer room. I don't always have freezer room, so sometimes we just use them, or I make small batches of things, or I just can them as is. I really like to roast the cherry tomatoes slightly and then just jam them into jars and process them. So at the moment we've got lots of fresh eating tomatoes, and the best part about summer is fresh eating tomatoes, because we don't get to do that any other time of the year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some sourdough cracker dough, some olive oil based sourdough cracker dough, and then I use my pasta maker that's attached to my KitchenAid to roll it out nice and thin, because we like them nice and thin. So I will turn you around and get you set up on the bench, and then I will mix all the dough up. I use my KitchenAid to mix the dough as well because I have one, I may as well use it. So I'm going to get that started, and then we can have some fresh crackers to have with our tomatoes that come out of the garden each day. So bear with me and I'll bring you down. Alrighty, so the dough is, I do a large batch like I do everything else, so you could halve this. But I do 400 grams of starter, which is why I feed my starter really well, is so that I have these large quantities to do this sort of thing with. So I'm going to weigh in 400 grams of starter. Now this peaked overnight and then fell this morning, which is fine. It'll work fine for this purpose. I should have put it in the fridge, I didn't, but it doesn't matter. So there you go, 400 grams of starter there. And I'll finish up with that afterwards. Let's just put a cover on that for the moment. Alrighty, 400 grams of starter. Then you want around about 290 to 300 grams of flour. So I tend to do about 200 grams of plain flour. So we'll bring this up to the 600 mark, and then I top it up with spelt. You can use any flour that you want. You can use a whole grain flour. I would use at least some plain flour in there though. I like the nuttiness and the texture that the spelt gives, so I've got some spelt here as well, which I'm going to use. So I did 200 of the plain, and I'm going to start off with 90, and then I'll put a little bit more in if need be. So that's 290 flour. Alrighty, and then olive oil, about 65 grams of olive oil. Went a bit over, it's fine. I might have to add a little bit of flour to compensate for that, but that's the whole point of keeping a little bit of flour aside. And then a teaspoon of salt. As far as herbs go, you can use anything you want. I really like thyme in these crackers. I just find it really nice. So I normally do thyme and a tiny pinch of pepper. So you can put up to about 2 tablespoons of herbs in, just depending on what you like. So I'm just going to guesstimate about the 2 tablespoons of thyme leaves there, and I'm going to put 2 pinches of fresh ground black pepper in there as well. Okay. I think I've just put my hand in front of the camera that whole time because I didn't think about it or where the angle was. But anyway, so that's all in there. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it on the KitchenAid with the dough hook and let it come together. I will have to use my hands at some point because it's just not enough dough for the KitchenAid to do a super job at it. So I will have to use my hands to knead it out a little bit afterwards. But we'll stick it on the KitchenAid first to bring it all together a little bit neater. just bring it together. Excuse my messy invention back there. I couldn't get my pasta roller off. I couldn't get the screw undone. Darryl's not here at the moment, so I'll have to get him to do it, but I'm going to use it for the crackers anyway, so it didn't really matter. So this is my pasta roller. It's not a KitchenAid brand. It's a eBay buy. It works perfectly fine. Doesn't have a cutter. It's just the roller. Alright, so that's brought it all together into more of a dough. There's lots of mess on the sides of the bowl and things like that. So I'm just going to see if it'll pick a bit more off the sides. And then once it's done about as much as it's going to do, I'll pull it off and I'll just use my hand to clean it all up. But it looks like it's picking a lot up off the sides now. You can hear the change in the KitchenAid that tells you that the dough is starting to be brought together a bit more because the KitchenAid is having to work a little bit harder. Flies everywhere. That's all coming away from the sides into one big ball in the middle there now. And that looks pretty good to me. So I think that was about 90 seconds. So we're going to turn that off, drop it, and then I'll bring it back over here. Alright, so it's pulled away from the sides really well there. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my hands to make sure I pick up any of that dough that's on the sides there. Scrape that up, use the dough to pick it all up like that. And that's it. So it's a nice bouncy sort of a dough at the moment. The problem is that when you've got a bouncy dough and you're trying to put it through a roller, it doesn't roll very well. So what we're going to do with it now is that little bit of extra flour that went in there is partly what's making it bouncy. So we're going to wrap it in some cling wrap. I'm going to split it into two because it's a big batch, and then I'm going to wrap it in some cling wrap or a Ziploc bag or something, beeswax wrap, whatever I can find around, and stick it in the fridge for at least half an hour. I have had it in the fridge for, I want to say, a couple of days, and it's been fine. There's no eggs or anything in it, so there's nothing that can really go off. It just gets a little bit more sour. It does discolor if it gets too much air to it. So that's why you got to wrap it up fairly tight. So we'll do that now, wrap it up, I'll stick it in the fridge, and then I'll bring you back when I'm ready to roll it out. I'm going to feed the minions some lunch first, and then I will come back. So there you go. Alrighty, so my dough has been chilling in the fridge, and now I'm going to start working on rolling it out. So what I do is I use Alright, so I've got a piece here. I roll it out manually to a bit of an oval shape before I use the pasta roller, just to make it easier to feed through. And then set the pasta roller on the biggest size, which for me is an 8, and let it feed through. You just have to make sure that the points is narrower to catch the roller, and then you'll just let that feed through. And then I drop it to 6 and feed it through. And then to 4 and feed it through. And then due to the weight of it, I generally cut it in half because otherwise it'll tear, and take it down to the last one, which is 2, and feed it through. We like them nice and thin. You don't have to take them this narrow, but we like it this thin. So a piece of herb has obviously gotten caught in the middle there and torn it, which doesn't matter because we're going to be cutting it anyway. So just lay that out on the board out on the mat here, and I'm just going to take the other one down to the 2. Obviously there's a piece stuck in the roller there, which I'll fish out. It's slicing this one as well. Again, that doesn't matter because we're going to slice the biscuits up anyway. So we'll turn this off. I'll open that up and just knock that little bit of spice out of there so it doesn't affect the next one. Alright, so then we grab a baking tray. Alright, then we find a baking tray, and all I do is I lay the biscuits on the tray in whatever fashion needs to be, and I slice them off to fit as needed, like that, and then line them all up as works, however's needed. They can all be pretty close together because they don't spread, so it can all just be close to each other like that. And then we'll cut this one up as well and place it here.
Why are you making?
And there as well. Okay, so we got a little bit of excess for the next tray, which is fine. So then we end up with this. Tilt you down here so you can see. And like this. Oh, no. Okay. So then we like our biscuits in smaller pieces, and I like to score them before I cook them. So I just go through and score with my handy dandy little tool here that I use for pasta as well as crackers, and score them. Nothing particularly even or fancy about it, just into small pieces, and it separates itself as it cooks that way. And then just like that. I'm just going to cut this into chunks because it's already pretty narrow, like that. So everything's scored on the tray. Then we want to sprinkle it with a little bit of water. I normally use a spray bottle with some water in it, but it doesn't look like my spray bottle is sitting here at the moment. So what you can do is you can use a pastry brush, which I should have just here, which I'm just going to grab in a second. Alright, I found my pastry brush, so I've just got a measuring cup here with some water in it, and we're just going to very lightly dampen the surface of the crackers, just like this. You could use oil spray if you wanted as well, that would work. I just find water is enough. There's enough oil in the biscuits. And then I've got a bit of flake salt here that I'm just going to sprinkle over the top, and that little bit of water helps for the salt to adhere to the biscuits. So just a little, there's some salt in the dough, so you don't need too much. This is more about texture than anything else. And then we can, when we have them with tomato on them, we put a little bit of salt on the tomato anyway, generally speaking. So there you go. So they're slightly dampened, some flake salt on the top, and then they just go straight into the oven. So I'm just going to fill a quarter tray as well, and then I'm going to get them in the oven. Alrighty, 15 minutes at about 180, 190 in my gas oven, and we end up with these. A very hot tray. So they crisp up nicely, they separate a little bit from in the score marks, which is what we like. So I'm just going to keep on doing trays and keep on putting them in. I ended up with enough starter to do another half a batch. So I did some with everything bagel seasoning, but because the spices, the sesame seeds and stuff are so much bigger, I probably won't be able to roll it as thin because they'll get caught in the rollers. So we'll give it a go. This one's been in the fridge as well, so I've just about finished cooking. I got the last batch of the the big batch of biscuits are in the oven now, the last tray of them. And I just thought may as well get it all done in one day. They stay fresh for ages in a glass jar, so I prefer to just get it all done. So running it through. So that's just on 8. We'll drop it to 6. Let's see how it goes. And then we'll drop it to 4. I might try going to 2 because I do prefer it thinner. And if this batch tears, then we'll know that we can't go to 2 on the others. Looks like it's managing fine. Obviously the seeds and stuff have been hydrated enough by being sitting in the fridge, so they got stuff enough to go through the rollers. There you go. So that went through on 2 as well. So this has black sesame seeds, garlic, onion, poppy seeds, all the stuff that I put in my everything bagel seasoning for my bagels in it. Because I just thought that it might taste nice. We'll see. And I'm just going to cut them up for the board and bring it back down. So I'm just putting it on the small board. I've got the small tray. I've got the large tray in the oven at the moment. So just making stuff fit on here, just like the previous batch. It's exactly the same. It's just slightly different seasonings. And then we will get these ones cooked up as well, just like that. A little bit of water, just so the salt adheres. Sprinkle of the salt, though there is salt in the bagel seasoning, so probably doesn't need much at all. And then I'm going to cut them up with my cutter, just like the previous batch. Score them, like that, throw them in the oven. So that's everything bagel seasoning in this batch of crackers. This is the everything bagel ones straight out of the oven. And this is the 1.5 batches so that were made all up. It's night time here, of course, so everything's a little hard to see, but this is the